Hey, what's going on everybody? Commander Crane here, and we are back with another Pioneer video, and today we're going to be doing my 2024 Pioneer review. We're going to be talking about a bunch of different things today, which I will be getting into in just a moment here, but the one thing I want to mention, if you are new to the channel and are not subscribed, you definitely should subscribe. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and we're going to be doing a huge giveaway once we get there, so if that's something you're interested in, I definitely would recommend hitting that subscribe button and follow the channel for more Pioneer content. So let's go and hop into it today. The things that we're going to be talking about, a couple different things here. So major tournaments, we're going to be going over all the major tournaments that happened with Pioneer. It's going to be just paper events, but I'll kind of talk about that in a second. We're also going to talk about the ban of restricted changes that happened, the overall RCQ season that happened this year, notable new cards that entered the format from sets that obviously were just made this last year, and then we're going to talk about Pioneer in 2025, which is kind of just like what I'm hoping for, expectations, and things of that nature. So, again, the first thing we're going to talk about, major tournaments. Again, paper events, I did not include any online events. It's not that they're not important or anything like that. It's just typically, the metagames are a lot different, and I wanted to include paper just because I don't know, just it's paper tournaments with Magic. I've always felt like that goes hand in hand. So the specific events that I want to talk about are going to be these. Pro Tour Chicago that happened very, very early in the year. I want to say it was February. And then there's SCG Con Richmond, the 20K that happened. All the regional championships, and this includes the ones that, obviously it's not just the United States, it was the other ones that took place during the end of this year. It was like October and November. And then I'm also going to be talking about the Magic Con Pioneer Cups. So with these, like, obviously they're not like huge events. You don't qualify for a regional championship or the Pro Tour or anything like that. But it is interesting just because of the volume of players that typically play in those events. I know, at least on the smaller end, I've seen like about 50. But it just kind of goes up from there depending on the format. And I wanted to include the Pioneer Cups just because people like to play a lot of different decks in those. And it's just kind of interesting here. So, all right, let's go ahead and talk about Pro Tour Chicago and the Richmond 20K. So right off the bat, I do apologize for the Richmond 20K. I could not find results for the full top 8. But for those who don't know, usually with at least team events, because this was a team trios, usually how it goes is like the first and the second team, sometimes they'll have like a bye. And then third and fourth, fifth and sixth, obviously duke that out. So I was only able to find the top 6 instead of 8, but technically for top 8, it was really more of a top 6. So, all right, Pro Tour Chicago, we obviously have Rakdos Vampires. I know that was Seth Manfield that won the event. And then Sam Pardee pretty much played the exact same list and was in 8th place. Then we have Boros Heroic. I don't know all the names of everybody. I just happen to know that Simon Nielsen was the one that got 2nd place on that. At least I'm pretty sure it was Simon Nielsen. And then it was Amalia combo, Lotus combo, Izzy Phoenix. It is Izzy Phoenix and another Lotus combo, which, spoiler alert, with Rakdos Midrange, or Rakdos Vampires and Amalia, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that deck in the future when it goes to the ban and restricted announcements. And then the Richmond 20K, we had Izzet Phoenix in 1st and 3rd. We had Mono Black Midrange in 2nd. And then we had Lotus Combo in 4th, Amalia in 5th. And then 6th, we had Boros Heroic. And I'll be honest with you, this is kind of the last time we'll mostly be talking about Boros Heroic. I think that deck was the most, like, medium deck I would say that people were playing. I don't think the deck was super good. I think it was just a lot of really good players played the deck. And, like, they're just good players, so that's how they did well with the deck. So, no offense to anybody that loves to play Boros Heroic, but I think the deck is not super strong. I think it's just a deck that people really, really love to play, and there's definitely nothing wrong with that. Okay, so the next batch of tournaments I want to talk about here, obviously it's a little bit different just because, you know, there's obviously the different number of regional championships and all the different events that took place. So what I decided to do for this next part is I just kind of threw it all together in terms of top 8s is the first number, and then the second number is win. So obviously you have like Izzet Phoenix there, for instance. So of all the events that I listed earlier in the video, there were 9 total top 8s, and then there was 1 tournament win, and that's what that refers to with all of the other decks here. With other, specifically, it mostly was just a bunch of decks that had like a random one of, like there was a random Azorius Spirits, and there was 1 mono green Devotion, and there was just a bunch of, I think there was like a Rona combo. I think that was also one of the others. Overall, it was just kind of a bunch of random decks, so I decided to just put it under other. But obviously, decks that actually got some tournament wins, we have Izzet Phoenix, Rakdos Tree, Mono Black Midrange. We have a few of the black demon-based decks, so we had like a Golgari list, list, a Rakdos, and then there was like the Dimir one that just kind of splashed the blue. And then obviously we have 5-color Yorion, and Dimir Ninjas also had one. And then I believe it was the Jund Sacrifice was the one that actually had the win. But I know there was also a Rakdos Sacrifice, which is why there's 2 of those top 8 specifically there. So overall, those are all the top 8 numbers from all the big major tournaments that happened over time, which honestly, it's a lot of diversity, and I think that's what makes Pioneer so special, is there's so many different decks that are playable in this format that you can go to a tournament with and do very, very well. And obviously, you have a bunch of different, versions. You have, like, obviously, the Selesnya Collected Company deck. If you like Spellslinger decks, you have Is It Phoenix? If you like combo, there was Amalia combo, but also there's a deck like Lotus combo. There's options for you regardless of your specific playstyle that you like to play with. So, okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the banned and restricted list updates, which obviously, so coming into 2024, we just had Smuggler's Copter unbanned, and then I know the big one was Karn the Great Creator was banned on top of that. There's also another card that I'm forgetting about all of a sudden. I'm pretty sure that was also on the ban list, and I feel bad that I'm forgetting it all of a sudden, but I just know that coming into 2024, it was kind of new because December we had some changes, so, it was just kind of like, let's see what happens with the format as a whole. And obviously the big change that happened was Amalia and Sorin were both banned at the same time as well. Unfortunately, which we'll kind of talk about in the next section, but some could argue it was a little bit too late. So Amalia was banned mostly because of its combination with Wild Growth Walker, because Wild Growth Walker says whenever a creature you control explores, put a +1/+1 counter on this and you gain 3. And then Amalia says whenever you gain life, it explores. So it has a little bit of loop itself, and then destroy all other creatures if its power is exactly 20. So there's a couple problems with this. One, if you give Wild Growth Walker indestructible, the game just keeps going. And part of that too is something we'll talk about on this slide, is the design oversight. So obviously you have Lauren's Escape. Target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, which obviously it happened at the Pro Tour. But if you give Wild Growth Walker indestructible, it just keeps going. The loop never ends and the game ends in a draw. The other thing you could do is with Defiant Strike, if they're doing the thing with Wild Growth Walker, you could buff the Amalia to have it skip the trigger where when it's 20 power destroys all of the creatures. You can have it skip it, and then it just goes into a loop. So overall, it was just really, really messy, and it led to some not very fun gameplay. You just get the big Amalia, and then you have, like, so much life. But there were so many opportunities where the game could just end in a draw. So that's kind of the big reason why they decided to go ahead and make that change. And then with Sorin, it was really, really simple. Vin Ripper. Putting a Vin Ripper into on turn 3, sometimes turn 2 if they were playing like the Abzan style with Galta and Maverin, but just being able to have that much pressure and that big of a flyer on turn 3 was just way too much for the format. So many different decks just fell behind extremely quick, and there were very, very few like efficient answers for Vin Ripper. Like obviously there was like Pick Your Poison, but people were having to play cards like Tears of Valakut, for instance. Like overall, there just was not a lot of good answers for Vin Ripper, and that's why they decided to ban Sorin, which it's not even Vin Ripper's fault. I mean, obviously we have it in our thumbnail there just because, oh, it's Vin Ripper, how much it tore through the metagame while Vin Ripper and Sorin were both legal in Pioneer, but it really was just more Sorin's fault. Like, to be honest with you, we knew that this was going to happen eventually, right? I mean, -3 to put a vampire from your hand onto the battlefield, a one-sided show and tell, eventually was going to be really, really good. It kind of just came down to needing their, like a good vampire. A vampire that you could cast, but one that's also just good to slam into play. Because obviously there was like Lord Xander back in the day, but no one was really doing anything with that. If you just play Vin Ripper, that's really, really hard to kill. The game is just kind of going to be over. So Vin Ripper with Sorin was obviously way too much for the format, and that's why they decided to go ahead and ban Sorin, which I definitely think was the right move. Along with Amalia, I think both of them were really, really good cards that needed to leave the format for it to get healthier, and I would say the format has been healthier since that's happened. But there's one more thing I want to talk about, a card that at the beginning of the year, I definitely thought was going to be banned in Pioneer, and that's Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I can't believe Fable is still sticking around. I think because of Sorin and Amalia, I feel like Fable just kind of like went back into the shadows a little bit, and people kind of forgot how good the card is, but I still think it is the single strongest card in the Pioneer format. I don't think that there's a card that's stronger than Fable. Like, you could make an argument for like Treasure Cruise or even Thoughtseize, but I still think Fable the Mirror Breaker, I think this is the next card that's up. I mean, I think we're one more dominant red deck or Rakdos deck away from Fable of the Mirror Breaker finally getting banned. The card is just way too efficient. Just every part of this card is just really, really strong and in combination with just everything. It's good. You can play it aggro. You can play it in mid-range. You can play it in control. You can play it in like a weird, combo situational deck. It's just good in everything. So we'll see. I don't know. A year from now, well, a year ago, I thought this card was going to be banned, and it's still in the format. So we'll see what happens moving forward, but don't be surprised if this card finally hits the chopping block, or it's going to do the exact opposite thing and become almost unplayable. We'll kind of see what happens with that. But Fable of the Mirror Breaker is still in the format, and we'll see what happens with it moving forward. Okay, so the next thing we have to talk about is the RCQ season that happened this last year. And honestly, with the RCQ season, I don't have a lot to talk about in terms of crazy things. It was the RCQ season. Nothing was really any different. Obviously, we had the very, very cool promos here, the Springleaf Drum and the Goblin Guide, which I really liked overall. But the reason I really put these here was I wanted to talk about specifically RCQ promos and just in general. So I think one thing that I struggle with promos in general with Magic is I feel like they know what cards are valuable, and all these other TCGs specifically, and I don't like to compare Magic to other TCGs, but I think one thing that other trading card games do really, really well is their promo cards are very valuable. Like, it is worth it to go out and get some of these promos just because of their value. I mean, heck, even look at the store championships. Like, the store championship promos, they're on top, they're, fancy special art, they're foil, they're extended art. And a lot of the reason that they're pricey is because they don't obviously make that many of them, because they're only for WPN locations. But the other reason that they're pricey is because a lot of the time these cards are really, really good. Like Urza Saga, that's a really strong card. And then they made the Omnath Locus of Creation a while ago. Like, that's a very, very strong card. And then we get our RCQ promos of Springleaf Drum, like a 25-cent, 50-cent card that is legal in Pioneer, but it doesn't really see any play. And then we have Goblin Guide, which you can pick up for about $1, and it's not even legal in Pioneer. So, I mean, I'm not, obviously when these art pieces are commissioned, I wouldn't be surprised if Wizards of the Coast didn't already have that RCQ season schedule ahead of time, and maybe they did, and I'm just maybe them giving them a little bit of credit that they don't get. But I don't know, I would love to see RCQ promos get even better, just because at the end of the day, if your promos are really, really good, it incentivizes people to go out and play. Like, imagine if they did Shieldred is the top 8 promo, or even as the uncommon. I'm trying to randomly think of a good pricey uncommon right now, and of course, as I'm thinking of Play with Fire, boom, that's another good one. Play with Fire, not that long ago, it was a $4 uncommon. Why don't we make these more worth it for people to go out and play RCQs? Some stores already struggle to get 8 people, and obviously you have to spend a couple $100 to get the kit. So if you make these really good promos, people are going to want to come out and play. I don't know, make a Shockland. Why can't we just make a Shockland as the top 8 promo? People love Shocklands. People play them in a bunch of different decks. I don't know. That's my opinion. I wasn't a big fan of these promos in the sense that I'd like to see some that incentivize people to go out and play, because I don't know anybody out there that was like, oh, I gotta go play because of the Goblin Guide. I have to go out to the RCQ. So I don't know. That's just my opinion on that. But I would say overall, with the RCQ, I was pretty happy with how it went overall. But there was one thing that I really wasn't happy about, and I feel like they waited too long to ban Sorin and Amalia. I feel like they were just kind of hoping that the format would kind of work itself out. And obviously it didn't happen, so it kind of stunk in the sense that the RCQ season happened, Amalia and Sorin were legal and causing a whole bunch of chaos during the RCQ season, and then a little bit before the actual RC, they decided to ban Sorin and Amalia to, kind of keep make things fresh and finally make a change. But it just kind of felt like, overall, it's awkward with RCQ seasons. Obviously, they changed their ban and restricted, what's the word I'm looking for? They changed the schedule so that way they can make some changes accordingly ahead of time, which is really, really nice. But it just felt awkward because they didn't ban them during the season, and then when people played these decks during the season and considered playing maybe, Amalia or Vampires at the RC, then they made the ban change. I don't know. It just seemed really, really weird to me, and I wasn't a fan of it personally, because the decks I was playing was not good against Vampires at all. And then after they banned Sorin, I'm like, well, that would have been nice to have that at least during RCQ season. So I don't know. Those are my opinions on RCQ season. Overall, I thought it was pretty solid. I had a lot of fun. I played in a couple different RCQs, at least where I live, and it was definitely a lot of fun. So Next thing I want to talk about is the notable new cards that entered the format. So go ahead and get comfortable. There's gonna be a decently long list. So I kind of just went in order from the 4 new sets that enter. Actually, technically 5 because of foundations. The 5 sets that came into that were obviously standard legal sets and made new cards that enter the format. Obviously, not gonna be talking about any reprints that weren't new additions to Pioneer. So if anybody's wondering, like, oh, why didn't you talk about Pioneer Masters? That's because the cards are already in Pioneer. They just weren't on Arena, obviously, but they were already in Pioneer, so I'm not going to be talking about those specific cards. So I'm just going to head in chronological order. And again, if I miss a card that you're like, oh, what about XYZ? It's so good in my enchantment deck. You're probably right. I'm just talking about cards that are universally pretty darn good in the format. So let's go ahead and start talking about it. And again, there's a lot of cards I'm going to talk about, so I'm not going to go crazy in depth with most of these cards. The Deuce, basically a cheaper Think Twice. Fantastic. Got Case of the Stash Skeleton, obviously really good in the Rakdos Transmogrified deck. Deadly Cover-Up, arguably the best black board wipe in the format. Obviously, they're all 5 mana, and they all have these weird situational things, but Deadly Cover-Up definitely has a really, really nice collect evidence ability attached to that. And then we have Vin Ripper. I'm not even going to talk about this card. It was crazy. I hope that it does come back in the format, though, someday. Archsteward's Charm, also fantastic. Sees a lot of play in Mono Green Devotion as well as Lotus combo. Pick Your Poison basically was kind of the duct tape holding together the RCQ format. It was the most efficient way to take care of Vein Rippers, so a lot of people were playing Pick Your Poison, but it's also just a really, really good sideboard card even today. We have Leyline of the Guild Pact, once again, another good card in Mono Green Devotion, and can lead to some really, really crazy draws for sure. No More Lies, fantastic. Basically Mana Leak, but better in the blue-white control decks, so overall pretty happy with that. They also gave us the Surveil lands in Murders of Karlov Manor. Overall, I really do like the Surveil lands. Really just mid-range and control decks play it, but they are still good nonetheless. We also have Aven Interrupter. Whew, what a good card. It kind of just made Selesnya like Taxes Coco kind of good. You know, your opponent plays a problematic spell, you collected company in response, and then try to hit the Aven Interrupter. I don't know, it's definitely really, really cool. 3 steps ahead, probably the best 3 mana counterspell in the format now. And then when you have 5 mana, it's basically like a Cryptic Command. So, hey, card's really, really good. Mage Maiden Lizard, a really good sideboard card overall at the metagame. Whenever there's a bunch of spell slinging decks going around, Mage Maiden Lizard is gonna see play. Definitely huge fan of the card because I play it myself. We also have Slickshot Showoff. I mean, wow. What a 2-drop. Slickshot Showoff just leads to some really, really crazy kills quite easily. It's also a wizard, which is relevant creature typing with Wizard's Lightning. So overall, big fan of Slickshot Showoff. Outcaster Trailblazer, really good at Mono Green Devotion. Into the Floodmaw, a fantastic sideboard card. You really just see it in a bunch of blue decks. It is also a pretty good main boardable card, but, you know, just 1 blue being able to bounce a creature, and then if you give them the tap fish, it's return a non-land permanent. Overall, just a really, really good card in general. We also have Mockingbird, card that's starting to pick up steam a little bit as of late. You know, people are splashing it in, like, humans, for instance, just to, like, all right, I'll just make another Thalia's Lieutenant, or hey, I'll just make another really good of this human, that kind of thing. Overall, Mockingbird is super good, and I think it's going to get better as time goes on. The Scavenger's Talent, a great card for the food decks, which we have another card we're going to talk about that's good with, like, sorry, not the food decks, the sacrifice decks. I mean, it's good in the food deck, but it's good in the Rakdos and Jund sacrifice decks. Emberheart Challenger, just a really good 2-drop. I mean, 2/2 haste prowess and a really good ability from a bunch of spells you're already playing in general. What's not to say, this mouse is definitely really, really strong. Next card, Heartfire Hero. Speaking of really good mice, card's super good. Also sees a lot of play, obviously, in Standard, and it sees a lot of play in Pioneer. Card's really, really good. We have Yigra. That's how I pronounce it. I'm sorry if you don't pronounce it Yigra, but I've always called it Yigra. The card is super good. Combos with Cauldron Familiar. That's it. That's the text. Enduring Innocence, seeing play in a bunch of different decks, mostly like Spirits, and then obviously the Selesnya Coco deck. It's also really good there. So, huge fan of the card. Card is definitely very, very strong. Next slide, here we have Sheltered by Ghosts. Card is sweet. I mean, just having like a Journey to Nowhere, but it's a non-land permanent is so good. And then it gets Ward 2 and 1/0 lifelink. Like, wow, what a strong card. I still think this card is very, very underrated. Then we have the whole Overlord cycle. This is the one I wanted to put on here because I feel like this is the one I run into the most on Arena and in paper. But honestly, the whole cycle is pretty solid. Overall, I expect them to see a ton of play in Pioneer moving forward. We have Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber. Obviously, makes demons really good. We featured a demon deck here on the channel before demons kind of popped off. And after building the deck, I was like, man, I wouldn't be surprised if demons are actually good in the format, and it definitely is. So huge shout out to Unholy Annex and Ritual Chamber. This card is definitely really, really cool. Next slide here, Unstoppable Slasher, another great black card from Duskmourn. This card's super good, works really, really well with, what's the name of it? The black demon vampire. I feel mad that I'm forgetting the name of this card all of a sudden, but yes, it definitely works really, really well with that card. Then Valgavoth, yuck. I mean, this is like the best thing, next best thing to play with Rakdos Transmog and Reanimate. This card is just super good. It's basically just a, arguably less good Atraxa, but it's still really, really good in its own right. Man, Duskmourn got all the good black cards, I guess. Fear of Missing Out. This card's super good too. It sees play in like the Gruul Delirium decks and in a number of different decks that want to discard. I know that Mardu Greasefang also plays this card, so overall, it's really, really good. Oh man, Pyroclasm. Whoo-wee! I love this card. It's so good against a number of different decks in the metagame. I'm not saying it's because of Pyroclasm, but it definitely feels like we see a lot less like fast aggro for the most part in the format, at least in paper, since Pyroclasm has came around, and there's definitely a reason why the card is super good. Screaming Nemesis, what an awesome card for red decks to get. Who would have guessed that a Boros Reckoner that's better costed with haste and a little bit better damage ability would be good in the format? Who would have guessed that? Nobody, right? No, this card's really, really good, and I definitely hope it sees more play moving forward. Kaito, Bane of Nightmares. So many good Duskmourn cards in Pioneer. Oh my goodness. Kaito is really, really cool. It's also ninjas. Who doesn't like ninjas? If you don't like ninjas, there's definitely a problem with you because this card is just super sweet. I love Kaito. I knew this card was going to be good in Pioneer. And hopefully we get some more ninjas so that way this deck can eventually get up to tier 1. That's all it's missing is a few good ninjas. It will definitely get there eventually. Okay, next slide here. We got to talk about, obviously, the dual land cycle that entered the format. I really like these. It's kind of like check lands, but pretty much better for the most part. I really, really do like these lands. They're good in Standard, they're good in Pioneer, so definitely a huge fan of those. Okay, and then the last set we have to talk about here, Bolt Wave. It's a bolt. That's all you need to know. The 1 mana, 3 damage, really good rate. Leyline Axe. I wanted to include this card, not that it's obviously popping off like crazy or anything in the format, but a lot of people are building this, they're playing this with, the Metalwork Colossus, which is just really, really cool to see. The people that play Metalwork Colossus decks, most of the time, they are very, very dedicated to playing Metalwork Colossus. They've always loved the card, and they play like Brass Knuckles and things like that for the card to work. So I'm really, really happy that the people that are very passionate about Metalwork Colossus finally got another card to be able to have to that deck. So definitely a huge fan of the Leyline Axe. And then I believe this is our second to last slide. We're really, really close. Savannah Lions. Turns out all cats needed to be halfway decent was a 2-power 1-drop. That's all the deck needed. Obviously, it did get Sky Knight Square, which I think is later on in the video, and if it's not, I apologize because the card's broken. But Savannah Lions, that's all the deck needed was a 2-power cat. Next, Zombify. I knew this card was going to be good in the format, and I'm not saying I was like, I'm cool because I knew the card was going to be good before most people. But, I mean, 4 mana unconditional reanimate spells. We got one in Duskmourn with Rite of the Month, and we have Zombify. Card's super sweet. Burst Lightning. I love Burst Lightning. I'm really happy they finally decided to bring this back. I'm kind of surprised that they brought back Burst Lightning, though. I always thought it was going to be like Firebolt or something like that, but I'm really happy that they chose Burst Lightning. It's fantastic. Definitely happy for it to be back. And then, this is our last slide. So I did forget the Sky Knight Squire. Shout out to Sky Knight Squire. That card's also really, really good. But Krenko Mob Boss. What a reprint. I'm so happy they finally brought this back. And even along with other cards like Elvish Archdruid, I'm just so happy that those cards finally enter Pioneer where they have a chance to kind of, like it's renewed, I don't know what the exact term would be, but it's nice to see these cards that are not relevant in Modern anymore enter Pioneer, and they're definitely going to be solid. Hinterland Sanctifier, also sweet just because people love playing Life Gain Soul Sister decks. Why not go ahead and give them another piece to that, puzzle? So I'm really, really happy about that. And whew, best for last, Woot Leaf Liege. What can I say that hasn't already been said on this channel? I'm so happy this card's back. It's super sweet. It's super aggressive. It's an Elf Knight, relevant creature types. If your opponent's playing Liliana, they're going to cry. I mean, Woot Leaf Liege, fantastic card, and I'm so happy that it is finally back in Standard, and most importantly, Pioneer. So, those are all the notable new cards that I wanted to go over, and there's a whole bunch, so thank you for sticking with me. And you want to know what? Let me know in the comment section below. If there's a card that you're like, I can't believe this isn't on the list, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll let you know if I agree with you or not, which I probably will end up. Spoiler alert. So, our last category that I want to talk about is Pioneer in 2025. What do I want to see in terms of the format, the cards, the, whatever, maybe even outside of just playing the game? What else do I want to see with Pioneer Pioneer moving forward. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So, I want to see some big Pioneer tournaments in 2025. Obviously, there's going to be no Pioneer RCQs in 2025. It doesn't mean that we can't play competitive Pioneer. Hopefully, Star City Games, for instance, hopefully they start doing some bigger tournaments with Pioneer. It would be great if we got a Spotlight series. There's a couple of them that haven't been announced yet. Hopefully, one of those is at least Pioneer, so we can play some competitive Pioneer. Overall, I really, really hope we see some. Maybe even on Arena. Like, maybe some of the qualifier play-ins, they do a Pioneer one. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but hopefully it still is relevant, even though it's not part of the RCQ cycle. Next thing, keep doing reprints. I feel like Wizards of the Coast, the last 2 years, has been doing such a great job with doing spicy reprints that are not only like cards that people used to play a lot back in the day and can play again in Pioneer, but are also cards that are just good in the format. Like Wiltley Fleet is one that I gravitate to. Krenko Mob Boss, really just overall foundations, I think was absolutely fantastic for Pioneer, but keep doing more reprints. Like spicy reprints, like I'm not saying bring back Counterspell, but bring back cards that people like to play that are good for the format. As long as it makes sense, obviously, with it being in a specific set. Like, it'd be kind of weird to put in, like, a Kamigawa card and just in a Dominaria set or something like that. But just keep on going with the reprints. Next thing, push Pioneer on Arena. We obviously just got Pioneer Masters. Kind of like I said before, let's see some more midweek Magic Pioneer events. Let's see some qualifier play-in Pioneer events. Just more Pioneer. Keep pushing it on there. People are going to play the format with Pioneer Masters coming into the format or coming onto Arena. So I expect, people want to play Pioneer. Give them a reason to do that. Next thing, new set of Challenger decks. It's been a while since we've had new Challenger decks. Let's make a new set. Like, I'd love to see it. Like, if I had to name 4 decks off the top of my head, let's do Mono Red Wizards. Let's do let's do a Rakdos mid-range. Let's make something like that, or some sort of good Rakdos deck. Let's go, man, I don't know. I'm getting put on the spot. I put myself on the spot here, to be clear. Did they already do a humans deck? Humans! And we need did we do a blue deck? We didn't do a blue deck. Oh, geez. Is it Phoenix? They already did that once. I don't know. Some random blue deck. You let me know in the comment section below what that deck should be. But I would love to see a new set of Challenger decks come back to paper. I think the Challenger decks are sweet. It's a great way for people to get into Pioneer. So overall, I'd love to see a new set. And then the last thing, and I would say this is probably the most important thing that I've been wanting, Store Championships. They used to be able to be either standard, Pioneer, modern, or sealed/draft. Bring that back, because they changed it to only being able to do standard. And I have nothing against standard, but Pioneer, it's my favorite format. I'd love to be able to play Pioneer at my Store Championships again. They do all these sweet modern and Pioneer promos, and then you can only play you have to play standard. People play standard, and they're like, what am I going to do with this Urza Saga? I don't know, just whatever. Just make it to where we can play Pioneer at the Store Championships again. People are already upset because there's no RCQ season and such for Pioneer. Why don't you still give people a reason to play Pioneer? Go ahead and switch it back and give the option for people to play Pioneer at the Store Championships once again. So that's my biggest thing that I'd love to see. But again, not saying it's going to happen per se, but it's just what I would like to see with Pioneer in 2025. And then the last thing, my closing thoughts. Overall, I think it was a really good year with Pioneer. I think Rakdos Vampires, I don't want to say it kind of left like a mark on the format. I think it's more of just like Pioneer's been around, let's see, end of 2019. So, coming on right now, we're going on 5 years of Pioneer. I can't believe it's already been 5 years of Pioneer. But I think it's more just like, it's part of the story of Pioneer. Obviously, we had like the Wild West, and then we had like that Dimir inverter. Oh my goodness, that was horrible. I can't. That was a horrible time to be playing. And then we got the, Rakdos Vampires. I'm sure maybe even this next year we'll get some crazy stuff that kind of happens to the format. But overall, I was really happy with how the format was this year. Again, I think they waited a little bit too long with the bans. But right now, Pioneer, as of right now, me recording this video in December, I think Pioneer is such a great format to play right now. And if you don't play Pioneer, you definitely should. The format's really, really fun. It's the least expensive format to get into, especially since you just buy your deck, maybe have a few upgrades here and there over time, and that's it. Overall, I love Pioneer. This is my 3rd time doing this overall yearly review, and I think Pioneer, it's in a great spot right now, and I'm really excited to see where it goes moving forward into 2025. So that takes us to the end of the video here. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. We're on our way to 1,000 subs, and if you want to be part of that giveaway, you got to be subscribed to the channel here. Huge shout out to our channel members, Ralph, Matt, Arcadius, Ray, Gary, Sarwanoki, and Night Red 3. If you're interested in being a channel member, it's only $1 a month, and you get access to the exclusive Commander Crane Discord, as well as other features here on the channel. So, I'm Commander Crane. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to catch you in the next one.